Okay, so get this. We're diving into some serious sci-fi stuff today, but hold on tight because it's not fiction. It's SpaceX and their Starship program.
Definitely a wild ride.
This test flight we're looking at, it's got everyone talking.
How could it not?
Picture this, a rocket taller than the Statue of Liberty, not just going to space, but landing back on the launch pad upright.
Like a scene out of a movie, except it's real life.
Our listener sent us an article about this latest Starship test, and wow, it's packed with insane moments.
It's a glimpse into the future of space travel, and let me tell you, the future is looking very interesting.
So SpaceX landing rockets isn't new, right? They've done it with the Falcon 9s.
True, they've got experience with reusable
The
rockets.
Starship, it's a whole other beast.
Oh, absolutely. The scale, the ambition, it's in a league of its own.
I mean, landing a rocket on its tail, that's already mind-blowing.
Talk about a balancing act.
But then I read about the precision involved with Starship's super heavy booster.
Okay, yeah, the accuracy needed for that is insane.
It had to touch down within half a centimeter of its target.
Like half a centimeter, that's like threading a needle from miles away.
Exactly. It's like they're playing a cosmic game of horseshoes and nailing ringers every time.
It really highlights the level of engineering genius at play here. We're not just talking about controlling a giant metal tube falling from the sky.
There's so much more to it than that.
Way more. We're talking about managing immense forces, temperatures, pressures, and making sure everything synchronizes perfectly.
And then there's the chopstick maneuver. This is where things get really wild.
Ah, yes, the chopsticks. You have to see it to believe it.
The article had these amazing images of the super heavy booster being plucked out of the air by these giant arms attached to the launch tower.
It's like something straight out of a Transformers movie.
Totally. It's mind-blowing stuff. So
Yeah.
this whole Mechazilla setup, as they call it, it's not just for show, right?
Not at all. It's all about reusability, a core part of SpaceX's vision for the future of spaceflight.
Okay, so it looks cool, but break it down for me. Why is reusability such a big deal?
Imagine if after every flight, airplanes were just thrown away and we had to build a new one every time.
That would make air travel ridiculously expensive.
Exactly. That's basically the situation we've had with rockets for decades. Use them once and they're done. That's why traditional spaceflight has been so costly.
So by catching the booster with the chopsticks, SpaceX is basically cutting out a ton of cost and turnaround time.
Precisely. No more fishing boosters out of the ocean or transporting them back from remote landing sites. It sets the stage for a future where Starship launches could be as frequent and routine as airplane flights.
Okay, now that is a game changer.
Yeah.
But hold on, it's not just the booster that's reusable, right? The Starship upper stage, the part that actually goes into space, had its own moment to shine during this test.
Absolutely. And it nailed it. We're talking a controlled belly flop during descent and a pinpoint splashdown, all while testing an upgraded heat shield.
I gotta say, belly flop doesn't sound very elegant for a spacecraft. What's that all about?
It's more graceful than it sounds. Picture the Starship flips over and uses its belly to create drag like a skydiver, spreading their arms to slow down during re-entry.
So it's controlled fall through the atmosphere. But why go through all that trouble?
It's all about managing the intense heat generated by atmospheric friction. We're talking temperatures hot enough to melt aluminum. The belly flop maneuver helps to dissipate that heat-protecting Starship and everything inside.
And that's where the upgraded heat shield comes in.
You got it. That heat shield is essential for Starship to survive the fiery plunge back to Earth. And it has to be incredibly tough because remember, Starship is designed for multiple trips, not just one-way missions.
Which brings us to our next point. Starship isn't just for short jaunts to space. This thing is meant for the moon, Mars, and beyond. But we'll delve into those ambitious goals in a bit.
Ambitious is an understatement. But before we get ahead of ourselves, I think we need to address the elephant in the room, or rather the tweet in the Twitterverse.
Ah, yes. This whole audacious idea of catching a rocket midair. It all started with an Elon Musk tweet back in 2020. Who else but Elon, right?
He's one of a kind. But here's the thing. While his tweets might seem off the cuff, they often offer a glimpse into where SpaceX is heading. This isn't just about grabbing headlines, it's about pushing the boundaries of what's possible and seeing if those seemingly crazy ideas might actually work.
It's like he throws these ideas out into the universe, and then his team of brilliant engineers figures out how to make them happen.
And they don't just make it work once they iterate and improve with each test flight. The article even mentioned that SpaceX's long-term plan involves catching the Starship upper stage with the launch tower arms too.
Wait, they want to catch the whole Starship? That's even wilder than catching the booster. Okay, my mind is officially blown.
Mine too, and that's part of what makes following SpaceX's progress so exhilarating. It's like watching science fiction unfold in real time.
And speaking of exciting, I think it's time we shift gears from the how they do it to the why it matters. Because this test flight, it's about so much more than just a cool rocket landing.
It's about changing the game entirely. But we'll delve into the bigger picture after a quick break.
Okay, so we've established that SpaceX isn't just launching rockets. They're totally changing how we think about space travel.
They're pushing the boundaries, for sure.
But what does that mean for, the average person? What's the big picture impact of all this?
It's about making space more accessible than ever before. Imagine a future where launching stuff into orbit is as normal as sending a package across the country.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Think about scientific research in space. It wouldn't be limited by those crazy launch costs anymore. It would open up a whole new world of possibilities.
That's pretty mind-blowing. But let's be real for a second. This all sounds incredibly expensive. Didn't the article mention NASA is involved somehow? How does that play into all of this?
Good point. You see, NASA has their sights set on the moon with the Artemis program, and they've chosen Starship to be their lunar lander.
So instead of building their own lunar lander, NASA's basically hitching a ride with SpaceX. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly. It's a new way of doing things in space, a collaboration between government agencies and private companies.
Interesting. So it's like a win-win. NASA gets a top-notch spacecraft, potentially for less money, and SpaceX gets to work with the biggest name in space exploration.
You got it. And for those of us who dream of seeing humans walk on the moon again, it's pretty exciting stuff.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But the article mentioned that getting to the moon with Starship isn't exactly a straight shot. Something about multiple launches being needed for just one lunar mission. What's that all about?
Yeah, it's not as simple as packing a lunch and heading to the moon. It's a round trip, and that requires a massive amount of fuel, more than Starship can carry on its own.
Okay, so how do they plan to solve that? Do they have like a secret fuel depot hidden on the moon or something?
Well, not on the moon itself, but pretty close. They're planning to build a propellant depot in lunar orbit.
A what in orbit?
A propellant depot. Think of it like a gas station in space.
A gas station
Ah.
in space.
Ah.
Okay, you've officially lost me.
All right. It's a bit more complicated than your average gas station, but you get the idea. Multiple Starship tankers would launch from Earth, each one filled with propellant.
Okay, I'm with you.
And they'd all meet up at this depot to fill it up. Then the Starship that's actually going to the moon, the one with the astronauts, would refuel at the depot before making its final descent.
Wow, talk about space logistics. That sounds incredibly complex.
It is, and we haven't even touched on the challenges of refueling in space itself.
It's not as simple as pulling up to the pump and filling her up.
Not quite. You're dealing with supercooled liquids in a vacuum, transferring massive amounts of fuel between spacecraft that are zipping around at thousands of miles per hour.
Sounds a tad more complicated than parallel parking, I have to say.
Ah.
It really makes you appreciate the level of skill and precision involved here.
Oh, for sure. It's rocket science at its finest. But if there's one company that can pull it off, it's SpaceX. They seem to thrive on these kinds of challenges.
They definitely have a track record.
Mm-hmm.
But let's not forget, this moon mission is just one piece of a much bigger puzzle.
Exactly. Their ultimate goal is to make humanity a multiplanetary species.
Yeah.
And that's where things get really interesting.
Mars is calling, and SpaceX is building the spaceship to get us there. And not just get us there, but potentially establish a permanent human presence.
Right. And that's where Starship's ability to haul massive amounts of cargo comes in. We're talking about transporting over 100 metric tons to the surface of another planet.
Hold on, 100 metric tons. How much is that in layman's terms?
It's like carrying the weight of a fully loaded Boeing 757 to another planet. That's a game changer.
So we're not just talking about sending a few astronauts. We're talking about sending everything needed to build a self-sustaining colony. Housing, life support systems, food production, the works. It's like something out of a sci-fi novel.
It's the first step towards becoming a truly spacefaring civilization. And with that comes a whole new set of challenges and things to consider. The article did mention some damage to Starship's flaps during re-entry, even with that upgraded heat shield.
That's right. Even with all the precautions and amazing technology coming back through Earth's atmosphere is no joke.
Definitely not. Those heat shields have to withstand temperatures that would melt most metals. It's an area where there's still a lot of research and development happening, not just for Starship, but for any spacecraft that needs to safely return to Earth.
It's a good reminder that we've come a long way, but we're still figuring things out when it comes to making space travel safe and routine. But that's part of what makes it so fascinating, right?
Absolutely. Every test flight, every success, and even the setbacks move us closer to that goal.
Exactly. So it's all part of the process. Speaking of which, didn't the article say SpaceX already got the green light for another Starship test?
They did. The FAA gave them the go-ahead for another launch, pretty similar to this last one.
I'm really curious to see what they learned from this test and what changes they make for the next one. It's like watching a science experiment unfold in real time with incredibly high stakes.
And that unpredictability is part of what makes it so captivating. But even with all the unknowns, one thing is certain: SpaceX is shaking things up and the world is watching.
No doubt about it. But before we get too caught up in the excitement of the next launch, I think we need to talk about the elephant in the room, the financial side of things.
Yes, the million-dollar question. We've covered the how and the why of Starship, but the how much is a pretty big deal, too.
Exactly. Reusable rockets are great in theory, but how does that translate to making space travel affordable for everyone, not just billionaires? That's what I want to know.
That's the million-dollar question, and it's one we'll unpack when we come back.
All right, so we've talked about Starship's cool factor, like landing with those giant chopsticks,
It's definitely a sight to see.
and we've explored its potential to take us to Mars and beyond.
The possibilities are pretty mind-blowing.
But it all comes down to this. Can SpaceX really make space travel affordable, not just another expensive toy for the super rich?
That's the million-dollar question, right?
Because reusable rockets are fantastic, but only if they actually make space accessible to more than just a select few.
I hear you. Well, the key to affordability lies in reusability. Think of it like this. Imagine having to build a brand new jumbo jet for every single flight.
Talk about outrageous ticket prices.
Exactly. That's basically what we've been doing with rockets for decades. Use them once and they're scrap metal. That's a huge part of why space travel has always been so expensive.
Okay, so I get that reusability equals cost savings. But how does that actually play out with Starship?
Starship is designed to fly multiple times, just like a commercial airplane. By reusing the most expensive parts, the cost per launch goes way down.
So instead of each launch costing hundreds of millions of dollars,
Which is the current situation with most rockets, yeah.
it could cost a fraction of that.
Exactly. That's the goal. And those savings, they have the power to completely change entire industries. Imagine launching satellites being as affordable as shipping a container across the ocean.
Wow, that would be huge. We're talking a complete transformation of
Yes.
telecommunications, Earth observation, you name it.
Absolutely. And don't forget about the possibilities for scientific research. Space telescopes, deep space probes, sending experiments to other planets. It would make things much more feasible.
It's incredible when you think about it. But even if SpaceX can pull off reusable rockets on a large scale, can they really build enough Starships to meet that demand?
That's another great question. They definitely have ambitious plans. The article mentioned their new Star Factory facility designed for high-volume Starship production.
Star Factory. It sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie.
It does, doesn't it? But that's SpaceX for you. They're known for pushing the boundaries. Building a rocket is incredibly complex, though. It requires top-notch engineering and skilled labor. It's a massive undertaking.
So they have their work cut out for them. But they've surprised us before.
That they have. But even if they can build Starships quickly, there are still logistical hurdles, right? How do you ensure those fast turnarounds between launches? We talked about catching the booster, but what about inspecting it, refurbishing it, making sure it's actually ready to fly again?
Right. That's a whole other challenge.
Exactly. Reusability isn't just about landing a rocket. It's about designing for reusability from day one. That means streamlining the whole process of maintenance, inspections, and refurbishment.
And probably coming up with new materials and technologies that can handle multiple launches and landings.
You got it. It's a challenge that goes way beyond SpaceX. It's going to take collaboration across industries, from aerospace engineering to material science to advanced manufacturing.
So it's really about building an entire ecosystem to support this new era of space travel.
Precisely. And that's what makes this such a pivotal moment. We're not just witnessing the development of a new spacecraft, we're seeing the potential birth of an entirely new industry.
An industry that could completely change our relationship with space, making it a place of opportunity and exploration for everyone.
It's an incredibly inspiring vision. It reminds us that we live in a time of extraordinary possibilities.
Well said. This deep dive has been quite a ride. We've explored the technical marvels of Starship, the challenges of reusability, and the audacious vision of humans becoming a multi-planetary species.
We've covered a lot of ground. It's clear that this is just the beginning of the story, though.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of SpaceX and their groundbreaking Starship program, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
The biggest takeaway is this: we are witnessing a new era of space exploration unfold right before our very eyes. What was once pure science fiction is rapidly becoming reality, and it's a reality that holds incredible promise for the future of humanity.
Beautifully put. And on that note, we'll leave you with a thought to ponder. If Starship achieves even a fraction of its potential, what will our world and our place in the cosmos look like in 20 years? Until next time, keep exploring.